But then he comes back the next day and he starts out by saying, whoa, that was a pretty bad day yesterday. I ended up doubting everything. There we go, back to that. I ended up doubting everything. I doubt the senses. I doubt a priori knowledge. The only thing he suddenly realizes, the only thing that he knows is that he doubts. And he realizes, well, can I, using methodological skepticism, in other words, applying doubt to whatever he thinks he knows, he goes, wait a sec, I doubt. Well, can I doubt doubt? No, because the moment I start to doubt, it exists. So maybe the only thing that exists is doubt. I can't doubt without doubting. Therefore, something must exist to be doing this doubt. Something must exist to be deceived. Now, something must exist to be deceived implies that you've got one thing here and then you've got the deceiver. But what if the deceiver is deceiving itself? There is only one thing. Is it possible that the deceiver could be deceiving itself? Yes, that's possible. But what would have to still exist for there to be deception, and deception, we know there's deception because there is doubt, would be the deceiver or the doubt. This leaves him with this sudden realization that I do know one thing. Doubt exists. And that's his first thing that he can say without doubt. First thing he can say that is certain and indubitable. So he then says, let's call this doubt, for the sake of the argument. That is the one thing I know that is. So I don't know if that's me. Let's call it I. I am. I exist. Something exists. It's two different ways. He says, I am, I exist. Another way of putting that would be, I exist. Something exists. And then, what is this something? Well, he's just said that it is doubt. What is doubt? Doubt is an act of thinking. So what is this thing that I've called I? I am a thinking thing. That's the second conclusion. So the two key conclusions: I am, I exist. I am a thinking thing. So here we are at the start of meditation 2, and this is what's called the argument from doubt. It is an argument from, so it's an argument to something, to a conclusion, and the process is by looking at the reasons that lead to this conclusion are doubt. Let's go through. Premise 1, or reason 1. I can doubt my senses. We know this through the madman argument. We know it through the argument from dreaming. Premise 2. I can doubt universals. Malicious demon argument. Premise 3. I cannot doubt doubt. I cannot doubt that there is something that is doubting. To say I doubt doubt involves an internal contradiction. It is illogical. Okay? Therefore, something must exist. Let us call this something I. Therefore, I am, I exist. Now, this has actually been criticised as not being an argument. Rather, it is seen as an incontrovertible intuition. He realises it. It's not like he argues 1, 2, 3, bang. Rather, it's 1, 2, 3, well, wait a sec, that means this. Which, Some people say that is an argument. Others have sort of said that this is not an argument, it is an intuition. You can read more about this in the Meditations commentary, which is on our page. One apprehends existence by the act of thinking. You become aware of it by the actual being or doing it and being it. So, in terms of criticising Descartes' argument from doubt, one of the criticisms is that it's not actually an argument, it's just an incontrovertible intuition. The next question he asks is, okay, I am a thinking thing. What more do I know about this I? What is it? Is it a body? Remember I said I had a body, but then he doubted the body. He recognised that the body, he knows the body through the senses, so he can doubt the body. That didn't mean he didn't think he has a body, or that he's saying that the body is false, or that the body doesn't exist. He's simply saying that his knowledge of the body is doubtable. So maybe this I, this thing that exists, which is recognised, has two qualities. It exists and it is a thinking thing. Maybe it is a body. Maybe bodies think. Now, he looks at the body and he goes, this is known through sense perception, so it's not certain and indubitable. What did he just say about this thinking thing? It is indubitable. It is undoubtable. So it can't be a body. Could it be a soul? He acknowledges that he hadn't really thought about soul before. He doesn't really say that much in the text about it. He considers the attributes of soul and body. Nutrition and movement. Now, they're both recognised through the senses, so they're doubtable, so can't be them. Sense perception. Doubtable because of argument from dreaming. Thinking. At least he knows he doubts. Doubting is an act of thinking, and that's how he gets to that conclusion. I exist, I am a thinking thing. And if I seem to have gone over that twice, I have. Those two are the fundamental conclusions of the meditation 2. What else does he do in meditation 2? Well, he says, what is this thinking thing? He continues on. He suggests that it doubts, it understands, it affirms, it denies, it's willing, it's unwilling, it imagines, it has sensory perceptions. But he's still not certain about what it is. I'm going to just jump back a bit. He's still not certain about what it is. And this really freaks Descartes out, because he remembers that he felt pretty certain about his body until he worked out that it was doubtable. This leads him into one of the trickiest parts of this text. It's a little side step, which is called the wax argument, or the wax example. It's tricky because a lot of students think that it is simply another way of showing how the senses can be doubted. It's not. It's all to do with certainty. So let's go and have a look at it. Having arrived at the conclusion that he is a thinking thing, Descartes is struck by the fact that he has a clear idea about what corporeal means of the body, corpse, things are, but not a clear idea about his own nature. So he goes, I am a thinking thing, but I don't have a clear idea about what this thinking thing is. But I feel like I have a clear idea about my body. How can that thing which is more doubted be clearer than something which is certain? So body is doubted, but he knows it pretty clearly. Thinking is indubitable, but he's not really clear about what it is. How does this work? So he goes, take this piece of wax for an example. And he considers the wax and says, here it is a solid thing. But If it melts, it then looks completely different. And yet I still know it is the wax. So this tells him that the senses are not the source of his knowledge. Again, that sounds very much like just saying that the senses can be doubted. And sort of noted, this is not simply a repeat of his arguments against the senses being indubitable. Instead, this is part of his exploration of the idea of what he knows more clearly and more distinctly. So, you've got the wax. It's actually not said that it is a wax candle. Most examples online you look up will all portray it as if it's a candle. He's basically talking about a lump of wax, which he would have used to make candles, I'm certain, saying, I can see it as a lump of wax. If it melts, I still know that it is the wax, even though it has changed. I can see it as a lump of wax when it's first there and it's hard and it's solid and it's got a certain smell. All my senses tell me all this information about it. It melts, it looks completely different, it is become translucent, it's lost its smell. There's no sensory data that is the same as what was before, and yet I know it is still the wax. How do I know it is still the wax? And that's what leads him to, I'm going to jump to a next slide and then come back here. That's what leads him to say, well, maybe he knows it's the wax through his imagination. He can imagine this bit of wax turning into that bit of wax. The ability, the mental ability to think of something as this and then think of it as that. But he feels that our understanding of the piece of wax is wider than all the particular examples he can imagine. Therefore, the imagination can be the source, can't be the source of his knowledge of the wax. So he's dismissed the senses as the source of his knowledge of the wax. He dismisses his imagination. And finally, he posits that he has an idea of the wax above and beyond what the senses can perceive and what the imagination can imagine. And he concludes that it's mental scrutiny alone, through mental scrutiny alone, that he knows the wax. Now it is a hard one. In VCE, even if you're not really fully comfortable with exactly what he's saying there, you should be able to identify that the wax example is used. Okay, first of all, the wax example is used to say what he knows more clearly and more distinctly. That's the first thing. We could say the first thing was, the question arises, how can that which he doubts, i.e. his body, be more clear and distinct than that which he does not doubt or is indubitable, i.e. his mind? He explores how he knows things more clearly or distinctly through the example of a piece of wax. He dismisses sense as that which gives him clarity and that knowledge that is clear and distinct. He dismisses imagination as that which gives him knowledge and that which is knowledge of that is more clear and distinct. And he dismisses, and then he concludes that it is mental scrutiny. This, of course, could be challenged if you were wanting to argue the senses. You would argue that it was the senses that allowed him to know that this ball of wax turned into this puddle of liquid as it was heated. That you knew this because you watched each moment, if you watched it melt. You could argue that someone who did not watch it melt might have gone out of the room, they left a ball of wax, they come in and there is a pile of, a puddle of liquid, and that person, without the sensory connection of watching each stage, that person may not actually realise that the two things are connected, that they are still the same wax. suppose we'd have to do an experiment to see if people could identify that. And there may be some people who would walk in and say, where did the wax go? There would probably be other people who would look at the spot and say, there was a ball of wax there. Now there's not. Now there's a puddle of some sort of liquid. Using my imagination, I can imagine the wax could be a variety of different states. But that still doesn't put the two and two together. What Descartes is saying is that person comes in, they look, they go, there was wax there, now there's this puddle. They use mental scrutiny, their thought, and they go, wax was in this space, puddle is in this space, and they put, so to speak, two and two together, and they go, they are the same thing. They didn't need to see all the different changes. They can work it out through mental scrutiny. That is what he is saying. That is how he is saying that we know things clearly and distinctly. This leads him to conclude that if he knows the wax through mental scrutiny, surely the mental scrutiny through which he knows himself is even more true than his awareness of the wax, because the wax is something different to himself. So surely his knowledge of himself, the existence of himself, is even more clear and distinct. Much more distinct and evident. When he judges the wax by perception, so here we go, I'll read this, then you can read it yourself. When he judges the wax by perception, it is possible. All these tiny little spelling mistakes I find as I go. So please write this out yourself and correct it. It is possible. And let's wait 1 sec. Done. When he judges the wax by perception, it is possible that this is false, but not possible that the I is judging. Okay? It's possible when he judges by perception that the judgment is false. It is not possible that something is judging. When he judges the wax by imagination, I must have copy and pasted that. When he judges the wax by imagination, it is possible that this is false, but not possible that it is I imagining. Therefore, every consideration of the wax confirms that he knows himself, myself, even more distinctly and clearly. The example of the wax leads Descartes to accept that he does know his mind more clearly and distinctly than corporeal things. That is the key to the example of the wax. Descartes is considering what can be known more clearly and distinctly: the mind, which is indubitable, or corporeal things, which are doubtable. Note again that this does not mean that they are necessarily false. To address this, he considers the example of a piece of wax. He concludes that he knows his mind more clearly and distinctly than corporeal things. As part of this consideration, he questions the ordinary way we talk about things and how this almost tricks us. He notes that when we say we see the wax, we say we see the wax itself. It's just like the ordinary way we would talk about it. The word itself suggests the essence or truth of the thing, and that makes it really tricky. So he addresses this. He offers an example of looking at his window and seeing hats and coats. He observes that in the ordinary way of speaking, we say that we see the men themselves, but what we're actually seeing is the images of the trappings of the man or men. But there may not actually be men. We may not actually see the men themselves. Okay? We see a hat, we see a coat, we say, I see the men themselves, but we can't see the men themselves. They're hidden, if they exist. What if these hat and coats actually were concealing automatons, robots? Then the way we said, I see the men themselves, would have been wrong. We judge them to be men. The judgment is the key. Judgment is in the mind. Judgment is therefore more clear and distinct than our thoughts. Going back to the wax, I look at a lump of wax and I say, I see the wax itself, but I don't. I see something that is made up of sensory data. And that sensory data is completely changed when it's just a melted puddle, which I also say, I see the wax itself. The itself, I don't see. The itself is judgment. So he uses this way to address the ordinary way of talking. At the same time, it is implicit that the judgment may be mistaken, but what can't be doubted is that there is a judgment going on. This fits with his argument that he knows his mind more clearly and more distinctly. Just one of my favourite pictures. If I was to say, I see in the man closest to me, if I was to say I see the man, what I actually see is the shape of a man, but there is an absence of man there. Alright, now those couple of bits are quite difficult to understand. You don't usually, at VCE, I've never seen questions that have asked you to go into depth with them, just to be able to vaguely understand them and be able to use them in his general argument. Because the key that we at VCE are really focusing on is Descartes' general conclusion. And that general conclusion is there is a dualism between the mind and the body. There is something that is certain and indubitable, that is clear and distinct, and there is something that is doubtable, that is not clear and distinct. And it's in Meditation 6, section 35, that he sort of makes a jump and says, look, we have a clear idea of himself, I have a clear idea of myself as a thinking, non-extended thing, and a distinct idea of his body as an extended, non-thinking thing. This leads him to the conclusion that it is certain that I am really distinct from my body and I can exist without it. And that's probably one of the points where a few of you might go, wait a sec. This final conclusion is particularly relevant to the contemporary question of life after death. The idea that the mind or the soul can exist without the body. But it's a problematic distinction. It's known as substance dualism. He says that you have two different things and they are different substances, and that substance is effectively, this one is thinking non-extended substance and this is extended non-thinking substance. They are completely distinct. Raises the question, if they are completely distinct, then how do they interact? How do they interact in the case of example, me thinking I want to raise my hand and my hand raises? How did something that was non-extended, non-material affect something that is material? Descartes offers one solution to this. He says it occurs in the pineal gland, but the pineal gland is itself material, so that really just sort of puts the problem off, doesn't really answer it. So this leaves us with dualism. The mind and the body are distinct and non-identical entities. An immaterial mind, a material body. In contrast to that, there is the view which is called monism or reductive physicalism. Now, there's a whole range of terms that could get used here. Monism by itself is problematic because monism simply means, ism means a belief or a sort of theory. So mono, one, it would be the theory that everything is one substance. Now, monism as a word by itself could refer to the idea that we are all spiritual, that there is no such thing as a body, that this is just an illusion, that there is only spiritual substance. There is a spiritual monism. So that's an unsatisfactory term because it's not clear. Monism, do we mean, what is the one substance? Physicalism is a better term. Reductive physicalism is even clearer. Reductive physicalism is the theory that everything can be reduced, the explanation for everything can be reduced to physical. So dualism, mind and body are distinct and non-identical entities. Monism, mind and body are manifestations of a single substance. And probably modern science would argue that that is physical. Substance dualism, going back to Descartes, I can doubt my senses. This is as simple as we can put it. I cannot doubt. Therefore, mind and body are different. He does not argue that the body doesn't exist, just that they're different substances. Descartes' argument recognises a different property between mind and body, the property of doubt. And from property, he makes a leap to saying that they are different substances. He's following Leibniz's law. Look up Leibniz if you're not certain who he is. If two things, A and B, differ with respect to this essential property, X, then these two things are not identical. In this case, the property is the property of being doubtable or indubitable. Descartes concludes that the mind and body are not identical and are in fact two different substances. This is called substance dualism. However, it may be the case that there is only one substance with two different properties. Maybe Descartes has made a mistake here. Maybe he's made a mistake in the language he's used to describe this. Think about, the obvious example of a single substance which has different properties is water. Water can be liquid, the property of liquid, can be the property of solid, property of gas. But they're all water. Ice, water, and of course steam. One of the other theories is that there is only one substance, and it might be that if you were a physicalist, a reductive physicalist, you would say that that substance is the physical, but that it has two different properties. So i.e. the human is a physical entity with two properties, one part of it physical and one part of it mental. This becomes sort of tricky and it leads into the area of study 2 when we investigate it leads towards questions of identity, but certainly area study of 1, the idea of what is mental. What is the mental property? Usually the term associated with this is what is consciousness, what is thinking. Is it somehow immaterial? Is it purely material? Maybe the mental property is just neurons firing. There are bound to be physicalists who would say that thought is simply one neuron. Let's take it like a neuron as being a marble, and it shoots across and it hits another one. Physical, the act is physical, this one physically bounces into another one, and they just, lots of physical things happen, and we think. And I think, flower, pretty. Or I think, sun, nice. And I think, love. Love is, so this idea of mental would include thought, emotion, behavior. And it's going to lead to area of study 2, it's going to lead to our next thinkers, where one of our thinkers is a pure physicalist, another one of our thinkers suggests, so that's smart, and then the next thinker comes back in counter to smart and says, well, how do we explain consciousness? Smart, as a pure physicalist, we have in the past, physicalists have run into the problem of trying to explain certain characteristics of the mental property, such as behaviour. There was a psychiatrist called Watson, a very early psychiatrist who was what's called a behavioural psychiatrist. And Watson argued for a theory which we would call crude behaviourism. That is the idea that there is only the physical. There is no immaterial thought. There is only what can be verified by the senses. So, this is a sort of slight aside, but it's something you should be aware of, and you should be able to, well worth looking up J.B. Watson. J.B. Watson. So, crude behaviourism is the idea that there is no immaterial thought, there is only the behaviour that can be verified through sight. So there is no anger, such thing as anger, there is only the behaviour, and the behaviour would be, say, someone punching someone. But this runs into the problem that most of us would happily agree that we have been angry and not punched someone. Watson would argue that's impossible. You didn't. You weren't. There is no such thing as anger if there is no behaviour that demonstrates it. But nearly everyone I know would say, no, I have felt angry, but not behaved on it. So what is that feeling? It doesn't rely upon physical demonstration. What is that feeling? These are some of the complexities that arise out of reductive physicalism. Reductive physicalism is the alternate theory to substance dualism. Let's keep with Descartes to finish off. Substance dualism is his conclusion. It is possible that he's made a mistake. It is possible that what he's done is committed what's called the masked man error. So if mind and body are not different substances, then Descartes' conclusion is false. This possible error in Descartes' argument can be demonstrated by what's called the masked man fallacy. It goes like this. I can doubt my father is standing there. I can doubt my senses. I cannot doubt that the masked man is standing there. I cannot doubt doubt. Therefore, the masked man is not my father. Mind and body are different, or the mind is not the body. However, so this form of argument is designed to show that is an invalid argument. It's designed to show that Descartes' argument is invalid. It is a simpler way to see the absurdity of what we just said. Let's say it again. I can doubt that my father is standing there. I cannot doubt, so there's a masked man just standing over there. I cannot doubt that there's a masked man. Therefore, I can doubt my father is standing there. I cannot doubt that the masked man is standing there. Therefore, according to the logic of Descartes, the masked man is not my father. But that's ludicrous because obviously I don't know. He's got a mask on. It could be my father. The masked man may be my father, i.e. may be the same substance, with a different property, being masked. That is to say, the conclusion does not necessarily follow from the premise. This means, the way we talk about this means that it is invalid. The term invalid, don't forget, is a technical term. Students use it constantly in arguments, they use it effectively, interchangeably with, oh, that argument is wrong. Invalid, wrong. They just basically misuse the term. Invalid has a specific use. It means that the conclusion does not necessarily follow from the premise. So when you use terms like this, be very precise. Again, similar idea here is Descartes may be accused of having made a category error. Gilbert Ryle felt that the attribution of an ontological reality, okay, the category of ontological reality, is incorrect, and that thought should be put into the category of epistemology, and body and thought in the category of ontology. Hence he feels Descartes is making a categorical error. Of course, for Plato, the body is simply an illusion and not a substance because it. How do I get so many is's and it's? 1 second. I'm going to fix this while we're here. There. Because it constantly changes, which is what quantum physics now suggests. Whereas thought partakes of the mind, which is the true ontological reality. I'll leave you to go back and read over that, make certain you understand that criticism. I suppose the key takeaway here is you should be able to say Descartes concludes substance dualism. The mind is distinct from the body. This can be challenged through the example of interactionism. It can be challenged through the idea that Descartes has committed the masked man fallacy in the logic of his argument. It can be challenged by suggesting that it is a category error, that the language which Descartes uses to refer to mind and body and say that they are two different things is because he has suggested that they are both the same category, that they're both ontology, whereas mind is thought and body is ontology, according to Gilbert Ryle, and so therefore it's a category error. Look those up if you don't fully understand them. Make certain you can refer to them. Which leaves us with our key ideas: foundationalism, certain and indubitable; Cartesian skepticism, methodological skepticism; introspection, homunculus fallacy; madman argument, argument from dreaming; malicious demon argument; a priori, a posteriori, argument from doubt; I am, I exist, I am a thinking thing; res cognans, which we mentioned. You'd have to go back and just make certain you know it's a Latin term. By the way, you don't need to use the Latin terms in the exam. If you know Latin terms, great. Or Greek terms, well, knock yourself out. If you're really comfortable with them and you know them, use them. Look smart. But the examiners do not expect you to use them. The wax example, hats and coats exam, substance dualism, property dualism, Leibniz law, the masked man fallacy, category error, interactionalism. That is Descartes.